I went to the Air Force Academy and graduated in 1990, and then I became a military pilot. It was super difficult to have a relationship because the squadron would deploy me overseas for 60 days at a time. And I was like, I'll never be able to get married. It's, this military lifestyle is never gonna work. So I got out of the military. After flying 9 years, I flew refueling airplanes, and I got hired by a commercial airline. I went online to a dating site. So this was like before online dating was even cool. And I text a gal on there, her name was Nicole. In April 2nd, 2005, my wife Nicole and I got married. And then we decided, we were living in San Diego and decided that we wanted to start a family. So a few years later, we got pregnant and we had our two beautiful children, Tyler and Trevor. They were fraternal twins, so we were super excited, first-time parents. All of a sudden the day came where the kids were born. And so that was November 5th, 2008. And so we were the proud parents of two fraternal twins. We didn't know anything about parenting, but the thing was we had these twins. We had this instant comparison of Tyler and Trevor. And we started noticing that Trevor, he didn't sleep as well. He seemed to be awake all the time. He was super happy. He would smile, he would laugh. And it turned out that Trevor was awake for a reason. He was having some difficulty feeding. At about 2 months, we would drive in the car, and we'd put the kids in their car seat, and we noticed that Trevor's head would start to droop, and Trevor's head would start to drift off, and he wasn't holding his head up properly. And so we started noticing these little things. And so finally we got to the point where I was going back to work, I was flying for the airlines, and now Nicole was feeding both of the kids, and she wasn't getting any sleep. And she's like, something's wrong with Trevor. Something's wrong with Trevor. There was a 3-day weekend, I remember, where we called the pediatrician and we said, we've got to go to the hospital. And so we went down to San Diego, Rady's Children's Hospital, and we said, we're not leaving this hospital until we find out what's wrong with Trevor. They started doing all these tests. The doctors come in, and at first it's one doctor, and then there's two doctors, and then it's a team of doctors, and you just get this feeling in your stomach that this doesn't seem right. But they admitted us with failure to thrive, and then all of a sudden a neurologist would come in and he would start examining Trevor, and I could tell something was seriously wrong. And for me, he picked up Trevor and he laid him on a table on his stomach, and he grabbed him by the waist and he picked him up, and Trevor's body just went like this, like a C. And then he started looking in his mouth, and he was looking in the roof of his mouth, and I'm just standing there watching going, what is he doing? And then he said, let me show you something. And Tyler was there, and he took Tyler and he laid him on the table. At this point, the children are probably 6 months old. He laid Tyler on the table and he picked him up. And Tyler was like this. He just held his head up and he was straight. And he goes, this is what Trevor should do. And I didn't know what that meant. And so a couple of days went by and we were in the hospital, and he said, I'm gonna run some tests. And so we took some blood tests, and he said, I'm gonna send this off. I think this is a leukodystrophy. And I'd never heard that word before. He goes, there's about 40 of these leukodystrophies, and I think it's Krabbe disease. While we were in the hospital waiting for the results, the doctor came in, a whole group of doctors came in, and I knew it was bad. It was true that the neurologist was 100% right. Between the scans, the MRI scans of Trevor's brain, they knew that it was a central nervous system issue. His muscles weren't reflexing the proper way. Like when you lift the child, he should resist. He wasn't resisting. His palate and his mouth was malformed. The spectrum MRI was showing damaged white matter. And so that neurologist was 100% on point. And Trevor was diagnosed with Krabbe disease. And this is a little different story than many families because they have this diagnostic odyssey where they don't know. We were so lucky to find out right away that it was Krabbe disease. And I know that sounds crazy that we were lucky. Krabbe disease is a terminal illness where the children's brains don't develop properly. They have a slow decay of the white matter of their brains. They can't move their arms and legs. They don't speak. They develop normally for 3 to 6 months, and then they lose all their milestones. And eventually, the average life expectancy was somewhere between 2 and 4 years. Everything I read on the internet said that he would live no more than 24 months. I'm looking at this neurologist and I'm saying, this can't be possible. You have to understand, my son is still laughing. He's still smiling. And I'd bounce him up and down and he would laugh, and he would go from laughing to crying. It was the craziest thing. And so I'm talking to the neurologist, and I said, why is he laughing? I took him and I bobbed him up and down right in front of the neurologist. And I said, this can't be. And the neurologist said to me, that means he's consolable for now. At that point, we went from literally in 4 or 5 days from failure to thrive to a Krabbe diagnosis. He's going to die in 2 years. There's nothing you can do about it. They told us to contact hospice. They set us up with a social worker. At this point, he was screaming. This is 6 months in. He's screaming almost every waking minute of the day. I would say 80 to 90% of the time he was awake, he was screaming. And I'm talking extreme irritability. With Krabbe disease, that's one of the top symptoms. And extreme is, like I tell people all the time that understand what a colic kid is very difficult. A kid that's super irritable that is diagnosed with colic. It makes a kid that has colic seem like a dream. It was just so surreal that I had married Nicole. We had these 2 healthy children. Progressively, one wasn't responding right, and our instincts were something was wrong. And so we went to a hospital, and 10 days later we had a terminal diagnosis. And I'm sitting on my living room couch reading the directions on how to work a feeding pump and how to operate a suction machine with a kid who's screaming 15 hours a day, and I have no idea where my life's going to go from here.
It was standard preschool day. I went to school, had lunch with my friends, etc. And then I got picked up early. My dad picked me up early. We drove home. My dad didn't really talk that much, which kind of scared me a little bit. We get home. Basically, my whole family's here. They're all seated around the table. They're all praying, and they're all very quiet. And my dad walks me into my room. He sits me down on my bed. And he says, "You're never going to see your mom again."
One day she was doing laundry and she said, "I think something's wrong with me." I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I have blood on one of my bras." They did some tests and they found that she had a tumor in one of her breasts. And so she went through a surgical procedure and treatment, and everything was fine. They said, okay, she's cancer-free and she's going to be fine. She needs to go on these medicines for 5 years. It turned out that her cancer came back about a year later, and she died in May of 2014. The boys were 5. At this point, now I find myself thinking, how am I going to take care of Trevor and Tyler without Nicole, because she was everything.
She always would take me places. She would always drive me, just her and I. I would go to her work, and I always remember her stealing snacks from me from the mini fridge.
Nicole was this power woman. She was single till she was 34 or 35 when I first met her. She was career-minded. She was a saleswoman, and she was an incredible performer at work. But when we started talking about having children, she instantly wanted to quit. She wanted to be a mom, and her whole professional career, she was willing to throw that out the window to have children.
I always remembered her. She had big, white, bright teeth, and she always used to wear red lipstick, perfectly red lipstick.
As I think back from the time that I first got married to the time of, Trevor's diagnosis, and then the time in 2012 of Nicole's diagnosis and kind of the journey, I'd lay in bed, and the first couple of years I hardly slept. I had reached a level of situational stress and cumulative fatigue, or something just, triggered in my brain, where I ended up having what was diagnosed as a manic episode. And so I spent some time in a mental health facility. People have physiological limits, and I reached a stress level that my body had never reached before, and I ended up with a diagnosis that cost me my retirement. This is a poem that I got from my psychiatrist that I was working with. It has really become a part of the way I live my life now. It's by William Blake from 1863. It says, "Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. It is right, it should be so. Man was made for joy and woe, and when this we rightly know, safely through the world we go." I'm just glad that, I got help, I got care, and I came out on the other end, and I'm still fighting. Once Trevor took his last breath, it's now myself and my healthy son, and we have to figure out how we're going to live our life from here. Life will never be better without Trevor. I know I've said that before, and I know Tyler understands that. But Tyler and I are going to live. We're going to live for Nicole, and we're going to live for Trevor. And nobody wanted to live life more than Nicole, and nobody fought harder to live than Trevor. I don't want to waste one moment of my life. I have to live for Tyler, and if I can overcome this, I know Tyler will overcome this, and I owe this to Tyler. And I want our story to be an inspiration. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me, because I got to be Trevor's dad. I got to be Nicole's husband. I love those two. But it's time to live and remember.